Recording. Excellent. So when we lift the mallet, we're going to lift it towards our shoulder. You can open up your hand a little bit and then you drop it straight down. And when you hit the drum, you want to make sure that you're not letting it rest on the head. The drum is lava. You want to touch and get off it as fast as possible. So you hit and come up because the stick naturally wants to bounce. Even if you're not controlling it, you can hit it and it bounces off, no problem. The idea is just to control that bounce, hit and lift. And most of the time, you're going to want to hit in the dead center of the drum when you're just playing here. There are advanced techniques where you're going to play to the side and get overtones on the drum, but for a lot of what we're going to do right now, it's going to be in the center of the drum. So let's look a little bit, if we're just playing, hand, play, hand, play, hand, okay? If you're playing in the samba, like a scola de samba, bateria, you have the 3 different drum parts and everybody has their role. But if you're only playing, if you're the only Surdo player in an ensemble, then you have to kind of cover all the parts together. So we're going to work through a couple different ways of that, and we're going to start up my slideshow over here. So, transcriptions, for those of you who read music. Just to clarify points real quick, the notes with the pluses above them, that's going to be a muted note, and the regular ones are just a normal playing note. So we are going to look at how to do those muted notes. When you're playing a mute, you're going to want to have your hand flat, completely flat on the drum. You don't need to press hard, you just need to rest the full weight of your hand on the drum. And you're going to have it a little bit off to the side so you don't hit yourself. And you just play. So you have your open note, rest your hand on the head, and play. So then you try to get it in time. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And that's your basic idea of playing the Surdo 1 and 2 at the same time. And if you can see in the transcription above, we're going to play it with a little bit of pickup, because rarely do you ever just start on 1. In the words of Michael Spiro, you have to lift your foot up before you put it down when you're dancing. So you need to play a pickup before we get to the actual part. So we're going to play an open note as a pickup and then come into the actual part. So here, and then the trick is going to get coordinating your left hand to 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. And you want to put your hand down just before you play that muted note. You just almost like a flam, and making sure that your stick is coming off the drum. You're not getting stuck here, okay? All right, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, now let's try it, and we're gonna go into the rhythm. We'll slow down just a little bit, and then eventually we'll speed up. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, ready, and stop. So again, for those who maybe don't read music too much, these little dots, the double line with the dots in it, there and on the other side, that means that you're repeating. So we have this little opening phrase, we're going to repeat this little section of the groove, and then we have an outro. So let's look at the outro. This is basically what you would play to end a piece of music. It's also called a virada, and you can keep going if you want. We'll get to that later. But for now, this is going to be how we stop. And we're going to go 1, 2, and 3. Try it again. 1, 2, and 3. 1, 2, and 3. And being careful to put your left hand down just before the muted hit on beat 3. 2, ready, and 1, 2, and 3. And that's when you hear, maybe in a Pagode ensemble, the singer will call Piju pra para paro. I ask you to stop, you stopped. I ask you to stop, you stop. And that's your aural cue, or if it's a whistle, you know when it's time to end based on those cues. So let's do this whole phrase that's written up there. We're going to start with the pickup. We're going to groove for a little bit, and then I'll count 1, 2, 3, 4, and we'll do the little virada to stop. All right, here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2, 3, 4. There's our groove. And you don't need to put your hand up really high, unless you just want to for fun, but keep it nice and small, contained, because typically this stuff goes a lot faster, and smaller motions are always easier when you're going fast. Alright, let's do the ending piece. 1, 2, 3, 4, pediu, ba, ba, da, parou. Alright. Alô, alô, bem-vindo, Diego. Você já sabe como tocar, Diogo. Alright, so let's do that one more time a little bit faster, and then we'll move on to stage 2 of this pattern. So about here, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Alright, we're gonna come to the end. Vamos chegar ao fim. 1, 2, 3, 4. Pediu pra parar, parou. Alright, so that is stage 1. This functions, but it doesn't have a lot of swing to it. So there's going to be things that we're going to add with our left hand to add a little bit of swing to the pattern, which brings us to this little fun figure up here. So the same idea is there of having the muted notes on 1 and 3 with the little pluses up there, and the open notes around 2 and 4. And then right below it, you'll see I've got stickings written in. So R for right, L for left. Se você está brasileiro, R para direita, L para esquerda. And we're going to make this pattern a little bit more complicated. The rhythm that's happening between the left and right hands is 1 E and a, 2 E and a, 3 E and ba ba da da. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's the composite pattern between your left and your right hand. So what we're going to be doing, so if you check out the camera over here, is the basic idea without adding the mutes in is 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now what's going to give it the high and low sound is the muting. So we start with a muted note where it's going to be 1, and then you're going to tap your hand and play a 2. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1 E and a 2 E and 1 E and a 2. And the tap before your open note, you're not necessarily trying to hit the drum and get a really strong sound out of it. You're just doing a little tap to mark the sound and to give it a little bit of a swing. Bom dia, Maeli, bem-vindo. So let's start that pattern over again, nice and slow. We're not going to worry about the pickup yet. We're not going to worry about the ending yet, but just starting with a muted hand first and then a muted stick. So go nice and slow, 2, ready, and 1 T and a 2, 1 E and a 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Feeling kind of comfortable with that? So that is our basic pattern. Be sure just to check yourself, make sure when you're putting the muted hand, you're not letting the stick dig into the head. That's a really common mistake that happens. We go kind of like this, open, close, close. Make sure every time the stick is coming off the head, the drum is lava, except for your hand. So let's try that same pattern a little bit faster and work on the coordination. So 1, 2, ready, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, E, and one, two, ready, and stop. All right. So hopefully that makes sense. Thanks, Gianni. Let's add in the pickup to start now. So now, including that little left hand, you're actually going to play the left hand in time after that pickup. So just the and a 1 is going to be 3, 4, and a 1. So stick, mute, stick. Okay, 3, 4, and a 1. 2, 3, 4, and a 1. One more time, and a 1. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. Now let's do that and then continue with the pattern. 1, 2, 3, 4, and a 1, a 2, a 3, a 4, a 1, 2, a 2, a 3, a 4, a 1, a 2, a 3. Ejercicio, a 1, a 2, a 3, a 4. Last time, a 2, a 3, a 4, a 1. All right, so that's our little pickup. Now let's look at the ending, the virada. It's going to work the same way as the more simple pattern. It's just still da 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 da, and the same way as the pickup, and a 3. So da 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 da. You're just placing the hand specifically in time rather than just putting it down right before you play the muted note. So just the ending, 2, 3, 4, da 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 da, and da 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 da. One more time, da 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 da. All right. So let's go all the way through. Do the pickup to start, groove for a little bit, and then do the ending. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, and a 1, a 2, a 3, a 4, a 1, a 2, a 3, a 4, a 1, a 2, a 3. Let's do the ending. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. Sweet. All right, let's do it one more time, a little bit faster. About here. So with the pickup, repeat the groove, and 1, 2, 3, 4. That will function in a lot of situations. There's going to be a lot of fills you can add in, but as far as the basic groove, that's going to handle 90% of what you want to do. Now, for funsies, I didn't write out this part, but if you feel like you want the next level of things to do, you can add a little bit of a rim knock. So there's 2 ways of doing it. You can come back and hit the rim here, or you can drop the back side of the handle and you get this kind of rocking motion between where you're hitting with the head and being able to come back here. I originally learned playing this, but I've kind of gotten into this a lot more lately because you don't have to go back and forth so much. So without using your left hand, the counts are going to be 1 and you don't need to work really hard and try to like slam the stick down, just like a little knocking on the door. 3, 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. 1 and 3 and 4. Then the next step is to add in your left hand. Let's just add in the muted one. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1. Now we're gonna add in the touch right before 2 and 4. 1 and a 2 and a 1 and a 2 and a 1 and a 2 and a 1 and a 2. And it's a little bit of a tongue twister for your hands. If you take it nice and slow, repeat it a lot, it becomes really comfortable. Or if you don't want to use the back of the stick and you want to use the front of the stick, sometimes that's easier. Either works the same, but if you're going too fast, or if you're playing a really fast song, it doesn't really work too well. Yeah, so mechanically, it's just every time you lift the stick up, you're letting the back end of the stick hit the rim right here. And you just have to make sure that you do it in time. So when you're playing it up to tempo, it sounds pretty cool and it adds this nice little swing to it. Especially if you're the only drummer, say you're playing with just like a singer and a guitar player, you might not have someone to play telecateco. This kind of fills in that higher sonic timbre role for you. So let's try it one more time. We'll still go nice and slow just to make sure you get the idea of it, and then we'll move on. So using the rim knocks if you feel comfortable with it. If not, just the basic pattern that's written above. Okay? 1, 2, 3, 4. Not doing the rim, just like this is fine. A 4, a 1, a 2, a 3, a 4, or with. Come to the end. 1, 2, 3, 4, big. And that brings us to the end. Alright, so let's work in a couple little variations of things we can do to spice up that pattern, because rarely in samba, especially in pagode, do we ever just play the same thing all the time. We're expected to do some variations based on the songs that we're playing. So let's look at some basic ones where we're going to add in a, kind of what the third Surdo typically does in the samba school. Our pattern is usually something to this effect. Let's add in that 2 and that you play first on the third Surdo. So if we're playing this typically, 2, 3, 4. On 2, we're going to add a 2 and. 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So let's isolate that. So the 2 and, you're still going to need to have your hand come in and do the mute after you play 2 and 3. And 1, 2 and 3. One more time. 1, 2 and 3. Okay? So let's build that into the pattern. Let's start it up again, and let's go every other measure. Let's add in the 2 and, because it's a variation, not the regular part. So we'll do 1 bar of the regular pattern, then add the 2 and. 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2, 3, Thank you, Rob, and thank you, Rob, for setting up all this cool gear and tech for me. Much appreciated. All right, so that is a first level of a variation you can do. Now let's add the 4E that typically happens. That 4E we're going to add that into this basic part. So your hand is already playing the in the basic part. 1, 2, or 3, 4. So all you have to do is add one more note on the stick. 4, and 1, 2, 3, right, left, or right, left stick. 2, 3, right, stick. And if you want to do maybe a little bit stronger hit because you're taking the place of the stick with your hand, that's okay too. You can almost do it like a close slap on an atabaki to get that extra volume out of that drum. Okay? So let's do the basic pattern, and we're going to leave the 2 and for now and just do the 4E as the variation, okay? 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2, basic, 3, 4. Now with the variation, 2, 3, 4E, 1, 2, regular, 1, 2, 3, 4E, 1, let's put those both together now, where we'll do 1 measure regular and then 1 measure both with the 2 and the 4E. All right, here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, and 3, 4, 1, regular, 3, 4, 1, 2. Variation. Last time. And da. Alright, there's a lot of different variations you can do playing this drum like that, but hopefully that gives you a basic vocabulary to work with. And then as we start to move into the next section where we're talking about third Surdo variations, you can kind of think about those and try to put them on this drum, but while remembering the most important thing is keeping this time of the high and low mark. You can throw in all kinds of fun things in between, but the most thing, your job is to mark the time for everybody else and also cue people when to come in with that pickup. Typically the low Surdo is the one instrument that does that pickup and everybody else starts on 1 or just after 1. Same thing with tantan, if you have a tantan instead of the Surdo, playing that same role. So being nice and consistent on those pickups, super important. Okay, so let's go kind of on the next stage of this. Alright, we are going to talk about this little marcação pattern right here. So, moving away from the Escola de Samba, or excuse me, moving away from Pagode and Samba de Roda, we're going to go more to this Samba school idea. And this pattern is a marcação that I learned from Mr. Ailton, and this typically happens before the samba and enredo really gets started. Typically there's a nucleus, un núcleo, of the bateria that plays while the singer and the cavaco player do a pass of the enredo before everybody comes in. And it's kind of a broken down little thing. It's just a few people playing, and the pattern's a little bit more simple, kind of just gets everybody going before the whole train gets moving. So this pattern is very similar to the one we just did, but you're kind of just taking out and moving some things around. Thanks, Miley. So the basic pattern is going to be high, low, high, high, low, high, high. And this is actually where you can play on the side of the drum a little bit. move out to the side and get some of those overtones. If you haven't messed around with the Surdo too much, if you play to the side, you get these high ringing pitches versus, and you can kind of imitate the sound of different pitches of Surdos, especially if you start to manipulate the head with your finger in different spots. You can kind of experiment, move your finger around and try to get different overtones. The idea of an overtone, without getting into it too much, is that there's one pitch that vibrates at a certain frequency, and then there's certain other pitches that vibrate at different rates above that. And so by taking away the initial pitch, by placing your finger on the drum, you can hear more of the other wavelengths that are happening above it. It's a lot more complex than that, but that's just kind of the basic intro level of it. So you can get this idea of a walk. Kind of see, I'm hitting all the way over here, not exactly on the edge, but maybe 2 or 3 inches in from the edge. So in context of this pattern, we're going high, low, high, high, low, high, high, low, high, high. 3, 4, a 1, 2, a 3, 4, a 1, 2, a 3, 4, a 1. So let's put this pattern in context with the pickup, because you always have to have a pickup. So we're going to go just like we started the other one, and a 1. And we're just going to move to the side while we play the 1. 3, 4, and a 1. 2, 3, 4, and a 1. Keep going this time. And a 1, 2, a 3, 4, a 1, 2, a 3, 4, a 1, 2, a 3. We end the same way with the paro. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Sorry, here we go. 3, 4. Alright, so this normally gets played for samba in enredo, so it's going to be much, much faster, somewhere around 150 BPM. So let's not quite go that fast yet, but let's move it up because this pattern is meant to move much, much faster. So let's go about here, and then we'll try to do it at samba in enredo tempos. So pick up, groove, pediu para paro. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. And if you feel comfortable with it, and depending on the song, you can throw in very simple variations. This is not the place to do crazy cutting. You can do some that same thing. But this is more about your job as keeping time for the song, not necessarily showing off all of your skills right here. That's about as crazy as you should really go while the singers are going. So let's end. 1, 2, 3, alright, just to feel what it's like, let's go up to actual samba tempo. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's something that especially third players, but all Surdo players should be really comfortable doing, because that is the marcação. That's when everything breaks down, everybody in the bateria can stop playing, and then just usually caixa and a Surdo keep going. Sometimes you'll have a repenique in there too to do the calls, but caixa and Surdo just hold this down. You can play like this, or if you want to do some variation, do the pattern we just worked on. That pattern will serve you so well to be able to step in and play that role when somebody needs you to do that. So if you're in a rehearsal, like, hey, marque a sound, like, you know what to do there. That marque a sound just means to, like, marking the tempo. You're the one that marks the drum, marks the beat. So being really strong and especially pushing the tempo. If you are playing marque a sound and you drag and are behind, you are not doing your job. Your job is to mark, not rush, but keep pushing the tempo forward and don't let it drag, and bring the energy with you. So one more time, let's go up tempo, this pattern up here, and pushing the tempo. 1, 2, 3, 4. That will serve you really well to have that pattern really comfortable at all tempos. And be sure to practice to a metronome. It is very valuable to practice to the metronome. All right.